They told me my fence was unnecessary. They told me it was an eyesore. So the HOA forced me to tear it down. 3 weeks later, their precious Marina, the one with the yachts, the wine nights, the smug little clubhouse, was crawling with alligators, and I never said a word. Before we go any further, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your last chance. Hit that subscribe button now, because the next story only gets crazier from here. My name's not important, so let's just call me the guy at the end of Egret Lane, the last house before the marsh takes over. I bought that property specifically because of the marsh. Herons, otters, the occasional bobcat, and yes, alligators, not aggressive ones. Just residents, same as me. When I moved in, the fence was already there, 6 feet of galvanized wire mesh buried a foot underground, built by the previous owner specifically to keep wildlife out of the yard and, more importantly, to keep it from wandering toward the neighborhood's brand new marina 2 lots down. That marina was the HOA's crown jewel. 50 boat slips, a floating dock, string lights, the whole aesthetic. And apparently, my fence ruined the view from the clubhouse deck. I didn't think much of it at first, just another petty complaint in a stack of petty complaints. But then it became official. A letter, then a fine, then a second letter, this one with a deadline circled in red. I want you to remember that detail. The deadline. It matters later. I went to the board meeting myself, told them plainly that fence isn't decorative, it's functional. It keeps the marsh where the marsh belongs, away from your docks, away from your boat ramps, away from your kids feeding ducks by the water. The HOA president, a man named Gerald who wore boat shoes indoors, laughed at me. Actually laughed. Said, and I quote, "Alligators aren't stupid enough to swim toward a party." I told him alligators aren't stupid at all. That's exactly the problem. They follow the path of least resistance. Calm water, food sources, warm concrete to sun themselves on. Remove the barrier, and that path leads straight to his floating dock. He didn't want facts. He wanted the fence gone by the 15th, or the fines would triple. So here's where I made my decision. I stopped arguing. I started documenting. Photos, emails, the wildlife officer's contact info conveniently pinned to my fridge. Not because I was planning anything, I want to be clear about that, but because something in my gut told me I'd need it soon. Here's the thing nobody in that meeting knew. 2 weeks before all this started, a wildlife survey crew had already logged 4 alligators in the canal directly behind my fence, one of them pushing 11 feet. I had the report. I never mentioned it. I just smiled, said fine, and started planning how I'd take that fence down exactly the way the HOA demanded. Every board rule, every guideline, to the letter. Keep that in mind, because what happens next isn't sabotage, it's just nature, doing what nature does when you remove the one thing standing in its way. I took the fence down on a Saturday morning. Neighbors watched from their porches like it was some kind of parade. Gerald even stopped by to supervise, arms crossed, smug as ever. The marsh behind my property connects directly to the canal that feeds the marina. I'm talking maybe 200 yards of open water with zero obstruction now. For years, that fence had been the only thing redirecting wildlife traffic away from the docks. Within 4 days, residents started posting in the community app. Anyone else seeing more gators in the canal lately? One photo showed a 6-footer sunning on someone's kayak launch. Comments were mixed, some concerned, some dismissing it as probably nothing. I stayed quiet. I wasn't hiding anything. I just wasn't going to do their thinking for them anymore. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared that HOA for what happened during their 4th of July Marina party. String lights, a live band, 40 boats packed into 50 slips, and an 11-foot alligator cruising slow and confident right past the seafood table. It started with a splash near the fuel dock. Someone screamed. Then someone else spotted a second gator gliding beneath the floating walkway, barely 10 feet from a toddler's birthday balloons. Within minutes, the whole party had scrambled onto the clubhouse deck, phones out, filming instead of celebrating. Gerald, I'm told, tried to shoo one away with a pool noodle. It did not work. It did not go well for the pool noodle. Animal control got called, then the county wildlife office. Then, because someone panicked and said the word attack, which never actually happened, nobody was hurt, the local news showed up too. Turns out, without that fence redirecting them, the marsh gators had simply followed the calmest, warmest, most food-adjacent water available. And that water led directly to a marina full of unattended coolers, dock lights attracting fish, and absolutely nothing standing in the way. The wildlife officer who came out that night was the same one who'd surveyed the canal weeks earlier. He took one look at the setup and said, loud enough for half the party to hear, "Whoever had that mesh fence up before that thing was doing more work than you realized." Nobody said anything, but I saw a few heads turn my direction. The HOA held an emergency meeting 3 days later. Suddenly, my eyesore fence was the talk of the neighborhood, except now everyone wanted to know why it had been removed in the first place. Gerald tried to spin it, said the timing was coincidental, said gator activity naturally increases in summer. Technically true, conveniently incomplete. I sat in the back of that meeting and said exactly one thing. I told you the fence was functional. You said it was decorative. I just did what you asked. Nobody clapped. Nobody needed to. The HOA voted unanimously, this time to not only allow wildlife fencing along the marsh line, but to fund a new one themselves, built to the same specs as mine. Ironically better than mine. Taller, buried deeper. They even offered to reimburse me for the one they'd forced me to tear down. I declined. Told them to put the money toward the fence they should have never made me remove. As for the marina, it took nearly 3 weeks and 2 relocations before the alligator sightings finally calmed down. The floating dock still has a small dent near slip 14. Nobody talks about how it got there. And me? I've got a brand new fence now, funded by the HOA, approved unanimously. Nobody's called it an eyesore since. If this story had you yelling at your screen, imagine living it. Subscribe now. Because next time, it's not alligators, it's something even the HOA couldn't have predicted. See you in the next one.